This is, without a doubt, the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. I've always felt pretty safe in my town, but this one night made me realize that no place is ever truly safe. It happened this past New Year's Eve. My friend Jess called and asked if I wanted to join her and her boyfriend Tyler at the big New Year's Eve festival at the beach. Normally, I don't do much for the holiday, just stay at home and relax, but I thought, why not? It sounded like fun, and I didn't want to be the one sitting at home while everyone else celebrated. Every year, my town throws this huge festival by the beach. There are rides, games, live bands, and late-night parties. At midnight, the fireworks light up the sky, and it's an amazing show. The beach gets packed with people, but the energy is fun and festive. I'd never been before, so I was pretty excited. Jess asked if I could pick her and Tyler up on the way, and she also mentioned we'd be meeting our other close friend, Haley, at her unit near the beach. Haley lived just a short walk from the festival, so the plan was to meet there, hang out for a bit, and then head down to the festivities. I didn't have my driver's license yet, so I asked my dad if he could drop us off. He said yes, so I quickly got ready, and we were on our way. First, we swung by Jess and Tyler's, then headed to Haley's unit. She lived in a small 2-bedroom place with her mom, just a few minutes from the beach. When we pulled up, Haley was already on the balcony, enjoying the sunset. We thanked my dad for the ride, filed out of the car, and headed upstairs. It had been a couple of months since we'd all hung out, so we spent some time catching up, laughing and chatting with Haley's mom. By the time we decided to head to the festival, the sun was just about gone, and the night had set in. The walk down to the beach was perfect, warm with a cool breeze to cut the heat, and the air smelled like cotton candy, buttered corn, and fresh donuts. We rode the carnival rides, grabbed some food, and ate it sitting on the sand. The whole night felt amazing. For the first time in a while, it felt like we had real freedom. No parents, no curfews, just us. Later, we made our way to the stage where the live bands were playing. Classics like YMCA and Time Warp had the whole crowd dancing. We stayed there for about an hour, singing and having a great time. It was everything I'd hoped for. Around 11 p.m., we decided to head back to Haley's unit for some water, since we'd spent all our money and were starting to feel tired. The walk back was just as pleasant. Warm air, a clear sky, and people laughing and shouting Happy New Year along the way. Even some drunk partygoers yelled down to us from their balcony, wishing us an epic New Year. We laughed, waved, and kept walking. But as we moved away from the festival, the light and noise faded, leaving us in near darkness. There weren't many streetlights near Haley's unit, and the moon was the only thing lighting our path. That's when I started to feel uneasy. You know that gut feeling, the one that tells you something's off? It hit me hard. I suddenly felt like we were being watched. Trying not to seem paranoid, I casually moved to walk between Haley and Tyler, instead of on the outside of the group. I told myself it was just the sudden quiet. It felt too still after all the chaos at the beach. We ran into some people we knew from school on the way, and the weird feeling faded as we chatted with them. When we reached Haley's unit, we climbed the stairs, greeted her mom and her mom's boyfriend, and grabbed some water from the fridge. We were all worn out and decided to chill for a bit before heading back for the fireworks at midnight. It felt good to relax for a while. At 11:45, we got ready to head back to the beach. We didn't get far, though. About a minute into the walk, Haley realized she'd forgotten her pain medication for her knee. Jess was clearly annoyed, but agreed we should go back for it, so we wouldn't have to make another trip later. The whole way back, Jess seemed off. Normally, she's the life of the party, always chatting and laughing, but this time, she was distant and quiet. I noticed right away, being the observant one of the group. I asked if she was okay, and she just said, "Of course." But something about her tone didn't sit right with me. We grabbed Haley's medication and headed out again. This time, Jess suggested we walk on the other side of the road, where it was more well lit, and there were families still out at the nearby playground. We didn't think much of it and agreed. It seemed like a good idea. We were halfway across the road when Jess muttered, "Don't look behind us." At first, I thought it must be something silly, like a drunk guy doing something embarrassing. But then she added, "Walk faster." That's when my stomach dropped. Jess never sounded scared, but now she did. Trusting her instinct, we all picked up the pace, resisting the urge to look back. Whatever was behind us, I didn't want to know. When we reached the other side of the road, I asked Jess what was wrong. Her response sent a chill through me. There are 3 guys in black hoodies following us. I recognized them from earlier. Earlier, I thought, confused. Jess quickly explained that she'd seen those same 3 men earlier, when we'd gone back to Haley's unit for water. A chill ran down my spine. If they'd been watching us then, that meant they'd waited all this time for us to come back out. That realization made my stomach twist. Unable to resist, I glanced sideways, trying to use my peripheral vision. My heart skipped when I spotted them. 3 tall, bulky figures following us. They were wearing black hoodies zipped all the way up to their chins, despite the hot, muggy night, and bandanas covered their mouths and noses. I couldn't make out a single facial feature, and that scared me more than anything. Jess, ever calm under pressure, whispered, "Don't look. Just keep walking. Faster." We all obeyed, even though Haley, Tyler, and I weren't exactly defenseless. We were all tall, reasonably strong, but none of us wanted to take on 3 unknown men, especially ones who were actively trying to intimidate us. I figured they thought we were easy targets. Jess was short and thin. Haley had mentioned needing medication for her bad knee. I walked with a limp from arthritis. And Tyler, poor Tyler, was carrying most of our stuff. I couldn't help glancing back a couple more times. Each time, the men were still there, still following us, and they had even picked up their pace to match ours. It was clear they wanted us to know they were watching. They were staring us down, making it obvious, like they wanted to rattle us. And it was working. Finally, the path we were on ended, leading to a patch of bushes and shrubs. We had 2 options. Detour around the bushes, which would bring us uncomfortably close to the men, or cut through them as a shortcut back to the festival crowds. None of us needed to speak. We all silently agreed on the shortcut. We moved quickly, weaving through the bushes while keeping close together. The dry grass crunched loudly beneath our feet, and I couldn't stop glancing around, watching for snakes. It was summer after all. But before we could relax, we heard it. The sound of rapid, heavy footsteps behind us. We didn't need to look. We all knew. They were chasing us. Without a word, we broke into a sprint, crashing through the bushes as fast as we could. Panic had taken over completely. There was no thought of fighting back, no plan. Just run. I could hear the footsteps behind us, gaining ground, and I felt sure they must be armed. Why else would they be so confident, chasing 4 teenagers in the middle of the night? Finally, we burst out of the bushland and into the festival's parking lot. We didn't stop running, not until we reached the crowds gathered for the fireworks. Only then did we slow to a jog, panting and wheezing. We stuck close to the largest group of people we could find and huddled together, trying to catch our breath. Tyler and I, both asthmatic, were wheezing the loudest. Despite the fear, the ridiculousness of our collective asthma made us exchange a shaky, nervous laugh. The fireworks started soon after, bright and loud, and for a moment, they were a welcome distraction. But none of us could fully enjoy them. The men were still in the back of our minds, a lingering shadow over the celebration. Originally, we'd planned to leave before the fireworks ended to beat the crowds, but now that wasn't an option. Instead, we stayed with the mass of people and walked toward the main parking lot where my dad would pick us up. Every step felt tense, but we stuck to well-lit areas, surrounded by other festival goers. When we got to the parking lot, I called my dad. He said he'd be there in 10 minutes. We sat on the side of the path to wait, trying to act normal, but I couldn't help scanning the area. Cars were stuck in traffic. People were chatting and laughing, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, we were safe. Then I saw them. Across the road, half hidden behind a tree in a dark spot where no lights reached, were the three men. They were watching us. I could feel their eyes on me, even though their faces were still covered. My stomach dropped when the tallest one, standing in the middle, shifted slightly, and the moonlight glinted off something metallic in his hand. A knife. He lifted it, waving it slightly as if to taunt me. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he brought it to his throat and mimicked a slicing gesture. My heart hammered in my chest as I turned back to my friends and told them what I saw. We quickly moved to another spot, one that was well lit and surrounded by other people. Those 10 minutes waiting for my dad felt like hours, but finally, he pulled up, and we wasted no time piling into the car. None of us said a word about what had just happened. I think we were all too shaken to process it. To this day, I still don't know who those men were or what they wanted, but I can't imagine their intentions were anything good. The image of that knife, the motion across his throat, it still gives me chills. I just hope we never cross paths with them again. When I was 13, the world was buzzing about the dawn of a new millennium. It was New Year's Eve, 1999, and while some people were panicking over the Y2K bug and others were out partying, I was home alone. This wasn't unusual for me. My parents had split up a few years earlier, in 1996, and after the divorce, my mom and I moved from Oregon to Tennessee to live with her best friend. By the time the year 2000 rolled around, my mom had developed a habit of leaving me alone for days at a time while she traveled to Florida. She'd always leave a note on the kitchen counter, saying where she'd gone and that there were groceries in the fridge. It wasn't ideal, but it was normal for me. We lived on a quiet road, surrounded by woods, a few miles outside of town. I knew most of our neighbors well enough to wave or make small talk, and I'd never had a reason to feel unsafe being alone. That night, I was staying up late watching TV. His bodyguard was on the USA channel. I remember that clearly. I had most of the lights in the house on, not because I was scared, but because I was 13 and didn't care about electricity bills or saving the planet. I felt completely at ease in my little bubble of home. While I was watching the movie, I started hearing strange noises outside. At first, I brushed them off, assuming they were coming from one of the nearby neighbors. A couple of houses were hosting New Year's parties, so it didn't seem unusual. But then, right around the middle of the movie, the power went out. Everything went dark, pitch black. I froze on the couch, my heart pounding. My first thought was that it was just a typical outage, so I stayed put, thinking the lights would come back on soon. I wrapped myself in my blanket and decided to wait. A few minutes later, I heard it, a noise coming from the kitchen, specifically from the direction of the back door. It sounded like the door shutting. My heart was racing now. The back door was right off the dining room, which connected to the kitchen, and the kitchen led straight into the living room where I was sitting. I sat there in the dark, straining to hear more. Every tiny sound felt magnified. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the kitchen floor. My survival instincts kicked in. I slithered off the couch onto all fours, crawling behind the ottoman. Slowly, as quietly as possible, I inched toward the space between the couch and the love seat. I knew from playing hide and seek in the dark during sleepovers that I could fit under the side table there, completely hidden by the shadows and the ottoman. But before I could reach my hiding spot, the footsteps grew louder, closer. Whoever it was had moved from the kitchen and was now in the dining room, heading toward the living room. I glanced up from where I was crouched and froze. Standing in the archway between the kitchen and the living room was a dark silhouette. Someone was there. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound, but I panicked. I shot to my feet and bolted, my heart pounding in my ears. I ran down the hallway, bypassing the front door and every other room, the guest room, the bathroom, until I reached my bedroom at the end of the hall. I slammed the door shut and locked it, but the lock was just one of those simple turn knobs that you could pop open with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when I heard it. A knock. Not pounding or banging, just a deliberate knock. It sent a chill through me. Was this person mocking me? Trying to scare me? Whatever their intent, I knew that flimsy little lock wasn't going to keep them out. It never kept my mom out when we argued, and it certainly wouldn't stop someone determined to break in. My panic was escalating fast. I was on the verge of tears when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. It wasn't manic or loud, but low, quiet, and genuinely amused. That made it even more terrifying. My mind raced as I started crying uncontrollably, trying to figure out what I could do. That's when I saw it. Boo's cage. It was huge, solid metal, and I realized it would fit perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I pushed the cage into place as quietly as I could, but it scraped against the door just enough to give me away. The moment they heard it, they threw themselves at the door. The sound of wood splintering and the doorknob twisting violently filled the room. Boo, startled by the commotion, started screaming and flapping his wings like crazy. The noise was deafening. I might have screamed too, but honestly, I don't even remember. All I remember was pure terror. I crawled under my bed, a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom, and waited. The metal frame wasn't much of a shield, but it was all I could think to do. The person kept throwing themselves at the door for what felt like an eternity. Then finally, they stopped. Even after the noise died down, Boo kept screaming. I stayed under the bed, paralyzed with fear, every instinct screaming at me not to move. I thought about escaping through the window, but I was too afraid they'd expect that and be waiting for me on the other side. Plus, it was several feet off the ground. I wasn't sure I could make it. So I just stayed there, trembling, for what felt like hours. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. Sunlight was streaming through my window, but the fear came rushing back the moment I woke up. What if they were still in the house? I decided I couldn't stay. I crawled out the window, figuring it was safer than going through the door. Getting out the window was harder than I thought. I wasn't exactly graceful. I tripped and landed awkwardly in the dirt, but I didn't care. Once I was outside, I crept around the house, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. The back door was wide open. Daylight gave me just enough courage to peek inside. The house looked normal. No terrifying figure waiting for me in the shadows. But the fear didn't go away. Against my better judgment, I went in. Looking back, I cringe at how reckless that was. But thankfully, no one was inside. I checked every room, every closet, every corner. I even unlocked my mom's bedroom door to make sure no one was hiding in there, then relocked it when I was done. When I was sure the house was empty, I went back to the back door to lock it. And that's when I noticed the breaker box on the opposite wall. It was open. The main switch had been flipped off. I turned the power back on, locked all the doors and windows, and then called my mom. The second she answered, I broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably as I told her everything. She called a coworker who came to stay with me until she could get home. After that night, my mom still took her random trips to Florida, but from then on, I always went with her. This past New Year's Eve, I decided to spend the night out of town with my two best friends and one of their moms. I was home for the holidays from college, and my friend Sarah invited me to celebrate New Year's in Palm Springs with her mom and our friend Rachel. I didn't have any plans, so I figured, why not? Palm Springs was about an hour away, known for its shopping, resorts, and nightlife. It sounded like a nice change of pace. The plan was simple. A chill night with some light partying. We'd watch the ball drop at a downtown block party, grab a few drinks, and dance a little. Since we're on the West Coast, the ball drop happened at 9 p.m. for us. Around 8, we left the hotel and started walking toward the block party, which was about a mile away. On the way, we passed a lively bar. It was loud, colorful, and buzzing with energy. Sarah and Rachel, both being gay, were especially stoked when they realized it was a gay bar. We decided to stop in for a bit. We didn't get any drinks, but we danced for about 15 minutes, soaking in the vibe. The crowd was mostly men, like 90%, but that didn't matter to Sarah and Rachel. They were already talking about coming back after the ball drop. We left the bar and continued to the block party. Once there, we grabbed some dinner and a glass of champagne. The ball dropped, the crowd cheered, and a DJ started playing music. We spent about an hour dancing and having a great time before deciding to head back to the bar we'd passed earlier to finish the night there. When we arrived, Sarah's mom generously bought each of us a drink, but decided to head back to the hotel shortly after. She was tired. It was around 10:30 by then, and the three of us were enjoying our drinks and dancing. At one point, Rachel tried a sip of my drink, curious about the flavor. I didn't think much of it. The bar felt safe. It was full of gay men, and I assumed no one there would have any particular interest in me. My guard, which is usually up when I'm drinking in public, was a little more relaxed. At some point, I decided to get a second drink. I walked to the bar, placed my order, and that's the last thing I remember. What happened next is what I had to piece together from Sarah and Rachel. Not long after taking a sip of my second drink, I turned to Rachel and asked her to come with me to the bathroom. I told her I wasn't feeling well, even though I had been completely fine just 10 minutes earlier. Once we got to the bathroom, I collapsed. Just like that. My body hit the floor, and I was barely responsive. Rachel, now panicking, somehow managed to drag my half-lifeless body out to where Sarah was waiting for us. When security saw me, they assumed I was wasted and told us we needed to leave. Sarah and Rachel had no choice but to carry me out of the bar. By this point, I was unconscious, barely able to make a sound. As they struggled to keep me from hitting the ground, they noticed someone else leave the bar at the same time, a man walking near us. But they were too preoccupied with me to pay him much attention. At one point, I threw up everywhere. On myself, on Sarah and Rachel, all over the sidewalk. It was a mess. The rest of the story gets even stranger. Rachel doesn't remember much beyond this point, so we had to rely on Sarah to fill in the blanks. Still struggling to carry me down the street, Sarah and Rachel noticed the man who had left the bar at the same time as us catching up to them. At first, it seemed harmless, until he started hitting on Rachel, completely ignoring the situation. He was persistent, asking if she wanted to grab a drink with him. Rachel, agitated and trying to manage me, snapped at him to leave, telling him her friend needed help. But he wouldn't back off. He kept following, offering to help carry me, and asking them again to go out with him. Thankfully, a middle-aged woman saw what was happening and stepped in. She stormed up to the man, clearly fed up, and told him off. I don't know her exact words, but it was something like, "Stop harassing these young women or I'm calling the police." That finally did the trick. The man left, though my friends still felt uneasy. A few minutes later, something amazing happened. An off-duty EMT and his wife ran into Sarah and Rachel on the street. Seeing my condition, the EMT immediately stepped in to make sure nothing was seriously wrong with me. After a quick check, he offered to carry me back to the hotel. My friends, who were practically dragging me by this point, gratefully accepted. He carried me all the way to our room, where he gently placed me on the bed, before he and his wife said their goodbyes. Rachel's memory picks back up here. She and Sarah were trying to clean me up and get me comfortable when, 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was the EMT and his wife again. They looked serious, and the EMT told them they'd just seen a man hop the gate to the hotel and start making his way toward our room. Terrified, my friends immediately called hotel security. Security searched the property but didn't find him. My friends never got a good look at the man, but were all convinced it was the same guy who had been harassing Rachel earlier. The rest of the night was a blur for all of us. I spent it vomiting and dry heaving, too weak to do anything but collapse into a pile of pillows and blankets on the bathroom floor. I woke up there the next morning, disoriented and feeling like absolute garbage. When Sarah and Rachel filled me in on everything that had happened, I was stunned. My last memory was getting that second drink at the bar. I assumed I must have drunk way too much, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I'd only had 2 drinks over 2 hours, and I didn't even finish the second. I'd never blacked out before in my life, even after way more alcohol than that. Then it hit us. My first drink must have been drugged. Rachel had taken a sip of it and and couldn't remember our walk home either, even though she'd been physically functional. The pieces fell into place. That man, the one who wouldn't leave Rachel alone and followed us back to the hotel, must have been the one who slipped something in my drink. But how? I never set my drink down. The only explanation we could think of was that it had been tampered with before it even reached me. Looking back, I'm beyond grateful for my friends and the kind strangers who stepped in to help. It's terrifying to think about what could have happened if I'd been alone or if circumstances had been even slightly different. That night still haunts me. It's a stark reminder of how vulnerable we can be, even in places where we feel safe.